Hello everyone, welcome. I wanted to talk about Powercreep because I know that's been a hot topic, not just necessarily with Sparkle in regards to how she compares as a Harmony limited character versus somebody like Bronya, and how our healer cast of units has basically entirely left behind the original standard healers in the same vein that the preservation of Fu Xuan has left behind Jabard. I want to discuss not necessarily just why people believe power creep is happening, because let's be very clear. If you're looking at it as an apples to apples comparison, Bronya versus Sparkle, even though Bronya has the cleanse and 100% action forward or action forward reset with speed, it is a situation to where Sparkle is at least more versatile to a lot of you than Bronya will be. Now, obviously, you can run these two characters on the same team. You can run them on separate teams. That is a benefit, but from apples to apples, Sparkle is superior to Bronya in most situations. And so that's led a lot of individuals, myself included, to kind of discuss and worry about power creep, like Sealy versus somebody like Jingliu or Blade and so on, and the relative usefulness of characters in the 1.0 launch of the game, such as Genshin, Clara, and then on. And obviously, we've had our duds, like Jing Yuan, who's gotten better over time. But in regards to power creep itself, I also want to make the blunt comparison to Genshin Impact. And this is going to be a bit of a ramble, but Genshin Impact originally, prior to Dendro, was focused on the largest number you can deal, which was dealt usually by Eula or a Hu Tao, alongside the two reactions that we really focused on, which was Vape and Melt. The only time we focused on anything else was Super Conduct, and that was with Eula, who fell off shortly after because the game started gearing itself around multi-bosses rather than just one big one. Beyond that, it took until Inazuma for us to finally get into the freeze meta with characters like Ayaka. Ganyu had a place there, but Ganyu wasn't really worried about anything until Inazuma. And then beyond that, it took until the release of Dendro for us to finally get the reactions that lowered the amount of investment a character needed to exceed. An example would be, essentially, a character like Nahida and Tignari needed less investment to match the standards of a Ganyu, a Hu Tao, and a Yoimiya. And I was comparing that to HSR. Don't get me wrong, HSR started with the launch of double banners. As it stands right now, we have Sparkle and Jing Yuan. We didn't get double banners in Genshin Impact until much later on, and I understand this is by the same developers as Honkai Impact 3rd, which has a lot more power creep. But in regards to just the state of the game itself, this is the first year of the game. And yes, we are nearing the end of that technical first year, but we are still filling out the elemental roster. We don't really have a good, solid pyro or a fire damage healer. Don't get me wrong, we have Himiko, we have Topaz, but I'm talking about an actual dedicated DPS and not necessarily somebody who's meant to either do follow-up attacks, which are kind of in a different vein, and meant to buff follow-up attacks, which are once again in a different vein. We, up until recently, were still filling out the elemental roster. Mono Quantum, even though it was a team you had most of the foundations of, you didn't really have anybody to buff anyone else until Sparkle released. Imaginary was slowly filling out that roster respectively. A lot of us didn't really have healers until after the likes of Fu Xuan, Huohuo, Luocha, and so on. And even if we're comparing the free characters, Lynx is free and she's a great healer. I actually adore her, she's super cute. And so we're filling out that elemental roster still, and I do understand that if you're looking at it from the perspective of how much damage can an individual unit deal, yeah, Yanqing is obviously going to fall behind the likes of these other teams like Jingliu in particular as a direct competitor, but Jingliu is a limited character. So if we're comparing other units, Jingliu Blade versus Sealy and Embodied Lunai, we also have to consider what these characters can rise up to in regards to how we can buff them. Defense Shred is something Sparkle can do. Defense Shred is something Pela can do as well, wherever she is. Right here. And Ruin Mei can also do this in that same vein. And so if we're looking at each of the individual characters like Sealy, like Jingliu, and like Barbara Lunai, these are the three carries I'm going to in particular focus on. The character who has the least investment required to get going is going to be Jingliu, because she gives us so much crit and she gives us so many stats to begin with that it's very difficult, not necessarily to build her incorrectly, but more so it's difficult to build a team in which other characters have a significant role. Obviously, you can do a Jingliu Blade double DPS comp, and yeah, you can buff up your Jingliu with somebody like Bronya, but beyond that, attack percentage buffs don't really have that much benefit for her. Crit damage, or crit rate in particular, doesn't benefit her that much. Crit damage can, but even then there's a point where you reach diminishing returns. If you run Jingliu alongside a Tingyun and a Huohuo, yes, you're getting her energy, but realistically at that point you're battling the question as to whether or not it would be better to just slide in a Blade or a secondary DPS, maybe even a Clara. Jingliu gets a bunch of stats, and that makes her really easy to build. And yes, if you have her signature with Defense Shred, if you have Eidolons, that changes your perspective. But at E0, the stats give her a benefit to where she's much easier to get going, But she's also at a downside, comparatively speaking, because she essentially loses the vast chunk of her damage. Her damage falls off a cliff if she's not in that buffed up state, compared to the likes of somebody like Blade, who, yes, has it a bit easier with his relic set giving him more crits, his light cone giving him more crit. I don't know, I forgot why I gave Misha his light cone, whatever. He has the benefit of an easier build. Not as easy as Jingliu, but nonetheless, Blade is a much more self-sustaining character. And you can, technically speaking, build a team around him with HoYoverse and the likes of a Bronya if you give her a planetary rendezvous. Comparing this to the likes of a Jingyuan or a Dot team or a Sealy team. Yes, Jingliu has a higher ceiling than all of these, or Jingliu has a higher floor than all these characters, but these characters also can take advantage of multiple other things. Sealy has the speed buff to help her get going more quickly, which is something you're not really worried about with Jingliu. Sealy also has resistance penetration. This entire team of Mono Quantum works wonderfully. Take out Sparkle, yes, you miss skill points, but you can still run with a weakness breaker. You can still run with an extremely good healer for debuff cleanse. You have Fu Xuan, an amazing character. Each of these units, if you were to invest more and more into them, will not necessarily just raise Sealy's damage as that primary carry, but everybody else can deal damage to a degree. Fu Xuan's burst. Silverwolf's own abilities deal decent enough damage. Sparkle is really the lowest damaging factor of this team. If we're looking at a Babadook, ignore the team comp, but everything here, even though, yes, he has a similar position to somebody like Jingliu, he does give himself a bunch of stats, not nearly as much. He can take advantage of more though. He can take advantage of attack percentage. He can take advantage of damage percent. Even Yukong was his previous best in slot partner because she gave him crit rate, crit damage, alongside a bunch of other stats, including attack percentage. So if you're comparing the two, I'm looking at it as a Jingliu is easier to initially get going, but other characters are easier to build a team around and spread the damage more evenly. Genshin Impact was all about hyper carries earlier on, and then shifted to the concept of, well, you only want your team to deal more damage. You don't want to just buff up your Raiden Shogun, unless she's C2. Instead, you want to run Raiden with a Xiangling, with a Xingqiu or a Yelan alongside a Bennett. This isn't necessarily just to buff up Raiden's damage, but to more so spread your damage evenly to ensure that your entire rotation isn't reliant on one character, and instead can at least function if, hypothetically, your Raiden, or in this case, your Jingliu dies, your Xiangling, or in this case, Blade, can continue on. And so, this is a bit of a ramble, but I'm interested more so to see how this progresses. I understand earlier on, yes, it does look like there is an immense amount of power, and bluntly speaking, there is. Each character is stronger than the last. And this is technically true with supports, but we don't really have that many supports. You have Sparkle, she's competing with Bronya. And we can't count the 4 stars because these characters need to justify being 5 stars, limited ones. If we're talking about Nihility characters, the same thing applies. Ruin Mei, yes, she counts, but she's also limited. So once again, if you're comparing the 4 stars and saying they're really good for Harmony characters, you need to consider that a 5 star has to justify its very own existence, and Genshin Impact's 5 star to 4 star comparison isn't exactly fair. Because it's not like we've had the release of a character who's extremely broken as a 4 star. No, we've had the same Fischl, Bennett, Xingqiu, Xiangling team since launch of the game. We haven't released a unit who competes with them because it's incredibly difficult to release a 5 star to compete with 4 stars that good that don't inherently break the balance of the game. So yes, we're nearing that 1-year anniversary in April, and I'm very intrigued to see where this goes. I'm having mixed feelings in general, but I'm intrigued. Silverwolf is cute. I will hold out for more of her. The same thing will go for Fu Xuan and Clara, my wife, alongside mostly HoYoverse though. Where is HoYoverse? Right here. Look at this girl. She's adorable. Either way, subscribe. I'll see you next time. And I don't know if you got this far, but if you did, hey, what's up, my guy? How you doing?